You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
Hey, welcome to an episode on location of Power Athlete Radio. I'm John Welborn, and I am joined in studio by Mike Sarraille.
Good to see you, man. It's been a while.
I know, it's been a long time.
We're in the same town, and
I feel like I never see you.
You just got back from the Sornick's camp, right?
Yeah.
How many people?
I'm actually wearing the shirt. So, about 700. Yeah, it's a big event. 17th anniversary, or I guess the 17th event that they've done of Sornick's. I guess originally I started as, Bert asking his dad, hey, your birthday's coming up. What do you want to do? And he said, let's get some people in, lift some weights, do some barbecuing. And now 17 years later, 700 people show up to this fitness summer Sornick's extravaganza.
Did you speak?
Mm-hmm. I was in the opener. A couple weeks out, Bert hits me up in kind of a cryptic text. Hey, can you talk? I'm like, sure. So then he just texts me back, hey, do you want to speak at Sornick's? I was actually waiting for a phone call. I guess we're past the point of that. And he said, hey, can you speak at Sornick's? And I was like, did we just speak? And I didn't know. I didn't really have anything to talk about. And I said, I don't, the one thing I would talk about, Victor and those guys are preparing for ADCC 2024, which is in August. And that'll be like the 2-year block that I train them in preparation for this event. So I have a, presentation I put together for the collective last year that's kind of like the add-on piece, but it's not finished because we haven't gone to ADCC 2024 yet.
When is that?
August 17th and 18th. In Vegas.
Okay.
You should be there.
Shanji's
getting inducted into the ADCC Hall of Fame.
You're kidding me. Okay, I'll come out. As much as I hate Vegas.
You just said Vegas, and I'm like, I'm like throwing a throw up in my mouth.
I've got to go give a speech in Vegas on my birthday, too.
About being degenerates.
Degenerates. How degenerates lead.
Yes. So
screw your buddy.
When I started training Victor and those guys was right after ADCC 2022. And I kind of agreed to this 2-year cycle of working with them and prepping them. So the culmination of our work together is coming. And so I said to Bert, I'm like, I don't really have anything to speak about. And he's like, well, you're good at talking. So why don't you just get up and talk for 55 minutes? And I'm like, have you never met me? Do you realize that the fear of failure of not getting up and presenting well will keep me awake at night much more than actually the presenting on the spot? And there's never a point where I'm just going to get up and fucking wing it for 55 minutes. So, but I had been working on something after the Jordan Peterson talk we went to. So last time I'd seen Mike, we went to go see the Jordan Peterson.
Which, let me stop you there. So Dr. Kirk Parsley, who we've had on many times, good friend.
Many times.
Got these tickets, gave us an invite.
Well, there's a bigger deep story. So a couple of years ago, after Jordan Peterson had come out of his coma, written his book, he wanted to go and do the speaking tour. His first one was in Austin. I bought tickets. I was going to take a couple of the guys that worked for me, kind of the crew, and then we were going to do a podcast about it. Parsley, a few days before, goes, hey, dude, do you have tickets for Jordan Peterson? I'm like, yeah, of course. I bought them. He's like, I didn't. So I booted everybody and took Parsley and his wife because Parsley is a much better friend and worth trumping, and on top of it, if you need something, Doc's your first call. I was sick, I called Doc and he's like, no problem. I'm sending you a fucking delivery of ivermectin. Little did I know I didn't have COVID, so it didn't work, but he's still there. So Parsley, once he comes back around, goes, hey, I owe you those 2 tickets. Would you bring your wife? And I'm like, I'll ask her. And so then, of course, she couldn't come because, kids and stuff. So I was like, call Mike.
So I was his third choice. I'm okay with that.
Well, no, it's second choice.
Second choice.
Yeah, well, I have to at least ask my wife. But then again, unlike your wife, unlike your wife actually wants to spend time with you. My wife's like, go somewhere with you? No way.
I'd actually push against you on that one. Yeah, she's like, get out of the house. Get out of the house.
Okay, so now you're reaching the point where now all of a sudden they're going to have kids, and now you're just write the checks. I don't care if I see you for days.
We're going to get into pregnancy.
Okay.
It's been interesting, but go ahead.
So it's a Tuesday night. We go to the Moody Center. Show up to hear Jordan Peterson speak for 7,000 people on a Tuesday night. I set the stage. Now what?
So first off, Doc Parsley got the time wrong by 1 hour.
Of course.
So we were sitting there.
Which is good, because that's the only way we would have been on time.
No, it's the only way you would have been on time. In fact, Will and I were joking that you were going to show up late. You actually showed up at 11:57 for a 12 p.m. podcast, which is a first, right, Will?
Which is pretty standard for me.
Yeah. See, you guys have the biggest egos in the world. There's everyone else on earth, and then there's like, oh, the NFL. And it's like, you guys can do whatever you want. But no. He got floor seats.
Yeah, they were nice seats.
Which were supposed to be nice seats. But the seats were the size of like a 150-pound man.
Yes.
I end up between John Wellborn on my left and Kirk on my right. And I'm like this, and then I would have to lean forward to sit like this and then rotate. And I think you eventually got up during the speech and you're like, I'm gonna walk around. What did you think of the speech?
Well, the problem was you were there, and then this guy sitting next to me who was built like, do you remember Mr. Toad's Wild Ride?
Yes.
He was built like Mr. Toad. So his head didn't come up real far, but he was wide. And I was kind of stuck because he was like lodged in my side, like pushing on my ribs.
So your feeling is
I could
back
not
sweat.
Fucking move. I was jammed in these fucking narrow ass seats.
Those were definitely not conducive for you and Kirk.
Well, maybe, Jordan is hoping by default that the seats dictate the people. He's looking for small, narrow people with no attention deficit disorder, so they don't have to move for whatever long his speech was.
Overall, what did you think of his speech?
Verbal masturbation. That's what I called it. So when I left there, after I listened to him do what so there's a term in rhetoric, especially, when you get up and present and speak and doing some argument stuff. So my major as a rhetoric major, we did a lot of like Socratic method, a lot of oratory. And I remember one of my professors was like, wow, that was verbal masturbation. You just jerked off to words, and we're all the worse for having listened to you do this disgusting thing to words. And that always stuck with me. And when Jordan got up there and proceeded to do his verbal masturbation, it spurred a lot of thoughts, not necessarily on the nature of what he was speaking, but more that the fact that it ended with a standing ovation.
So he did clearly state what he was going to address, that society was coming to a headway.
He didn't really say that.
He did at the beginning. He's like, society is coming to a headway. And that is what I thought the
talk would be about.
Yes. And it went completely into realism.
Well, and anytime you hear somebody start referring to the
postmodernists, thank you.
That's another form of verbal masturbation.
Okay. It was, one, I still think the world of the guy. It just, whoever was advising him.
Well, we have a Emperor's New Clothes moment. So the guy that he brought on to be his moderator was so enamored with anything that came out of his mouth that he didn't dictate to him. In public speaking, and especially when you're speaking in something like that, not just getting up and giving like a keynote, which you're well versed in, but he's effectively making an argument for something, which he's going into oratory. I mean, this is classic rhetorician. And I view him as a modern rhetorician. He sees something, he's going to argue a point. Now, what you do is you let everybody in the audience know the point that you're going to argue, and you basically frame your argument, and then you do it, right? Which is just classic. He did not do that. Now, if he had just said, hey, I'm going to drop you in from 10,000 feet on the way that my mind works and the thought process of how I work through things with this verbal masturbation of words, where he was hanging on word roots and coming to, all this stuff he was doing. I'm going to bring the Bible in. I'm going to give you this high level insight into how my brain works. Buckle up. If he had done that, I would have been like, okay, but he didn't. He said, what's going on around here is what he said. And then he dove into something that he didn't meet. And then he ends it. And the guy who was the moderator being like, Jordan, keeping him on task, being like, you did not meet the demand of what we set out to. What are you talking about here? This is nonsense.
He threw softballs. And that's what he's being paid to do.
This is by far the greatest moment I've seen Jordan have. And everybody, and so this is another issue. When somebody is generally considered to be the smartest person on the planet, anointed by Joe Rogan, because Joe Rogan has anointed Jordan Peterson as like the greatest thinker of the 21st century, the most powerful media personality in the world, anointed this man. Is he right? He's probably pretty accurate. I mean, Jordan Peterson, an extremely intelligent man with 30 years of clinical research and like clinical experience working as a psychiatrist. I mean, and has tackled some of the most complex problems and dissected them for me.
In unique ways, in very unique ways that have even framed my opinion on certain matters.
Yes. We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Power Athlete delivers battle-tested performance programming for every kind of athlete. So do you want to go from average Joe to MVP? Then dominate with Field Strong. Get stacked and jacked with Jack Street. Hustle in life and still build muscle with Grindstone. Fear no opponent with Dragon Slayer. Be harder than coffin nails with Hammer. Max out minimal equipment with Lean Enable. Or unlock those newbie gains with Bedrock. Get over to powerathletehq.com/training and choose your 7-day free trial right here, right now. Get lifting, get training, get in shape, all while listening to the rest of this show.
Yeah. And he is by far, I think, undisputed, pound for pound, the probably top thinker, philosopher of our times.
Well, that at least we have access to. It's traveling around. There might be somebody over there who's writing, the Ted Kaczynski who's writing in a fucking, cabin in Montana on the evils of AI and technology, which I don't know. Kaczynski, not that far off based off all this IA stuff we're looking at. So, as you guys know, the Unabomber, and made famous by bombing people at Berkeley. But he got up, and what was amazing to me was the fact that I was not necessarily enamored by Jordan Peterson, the person. I was interested in the words. I wanted to hear what he had to say. And I was left wanting. And the one thing that was amazing to me was everybody there, standing ovation, with stars in their eyes. Even to the point, Doc was like, that was amazing. I'm like, what did he say? He talked about one thing about, Doc didn't grow up with like a stable male figure in his life. And Jordan made some reference to that. That connected to him. I didn't even remember that part. So what was fascinating, and I went home and I wrote, just to guys give you a little bit of history. When I was 18 years old, I took a recruiting trip. I might have told you a story, to Cal Berkeley. And at the time, I was planning to be an attorney like my dad and my brothers. So they let me had this meetup with this guy named Adrian Cragen, who had been dean of the UC Berkeley Law School, which was known as Bolt Hall, which now they've effectively changed to Berkeley Law because of some 100 years ago, the guy said something, and now they have to scrub his name from the record books. But Adrian Cragen was about 80, had been a former dean of law school, was a tax accountant for the big three movie companies. For those of you guys, big three in the 30s and the 40s. He said something to me that's impacted me probably every day since then. If you want to learn to think, you first have to learn to read and write to the best of your ability. So when I have a problem, I'm thinking about something, I sit down and I write it out. And I start kind of like writing what my stuff is. Like 6 pages later, I realized why people had a standing ovation and why they were so enamored with it. Not what he said that night. It was all the things that Jordan Peterson has set up to that moment. The credibility and the authenticity of what he said on so many topics gives him so much free way to talk about anything. And it was that Emperor's New Clothes moment. Nobody was going to call him on it. Jordan, what the fuck are you talking about? This is nonsense. And
he missed the mark for sure. But the way he set it up, I actually leaned forward in my chair. That society is coming to a headway. Something's got to break. Well, no, I thought it was going to be riveting. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Here we go.
And he didn't. And he went so far off this way, and he was going here, and he was stuck, and then he went back. And he didn't. This is the problem when you ask a guy like Bert Soren, just show up and talk for 55 minutes. You're a smart guy. You're good at that speaking stuff. You can't do that. You have to sit down and decide, what do I want to teach today? Or more importantly, what do I want to present? What do I want to argue? And what do I want to have done at the end of this? This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show. So from that talk, I got really enamored, and I started really focusing on authenticity. And more importantly, what it was and why people have it and some don't. And the basis of my talk at Sarnex was on authenticity. So I spoke on authenticity for about 20 minutes. Then I did a little kind of deal years ago when I spoke at Sornex. I always made myself a promise. If I ever came back, I would give the people in the audience a little bit of a gift, a little bit of cheat code in how to present yourself, and more importantly, how to arrange your stuff. So I got into the ethos, pathos, and logos. And then the final piece was just a little bit of the Dragon Slayer stuff that I'd done with Victor and them. The authenticity piece is fascinating because I have this idea, and it comes from, I forgot the piece of the theory that it comes from. I'll have to pull up my notes here in a second. But the way this whole works is the reason that the world lacks authenticity is most of what people think, most of what people say, most of what people feel are the ideas and thoughts of others. Think about that, right? Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? So think about it in like two ways. Like you go to the car dealership, you test drive a car, you drive it around to see if you like it. So what I think happens is that people that don't know who they are, or more importantly, don't know where they stand on things, what they do, well, it's not even impressionable. I think they try on other people's ideas and thoughts to see if this fits them. And then what they effectively do is they thatch this armor of thought based off of like hearing something. Let's say you hear Jordan Peterson speak, or you hear somebody else and you think, I like that. Let me try that out. Let me wear that around for a little and see if it fits me. So I think it's good in that you have the experience of intelligent thinkers before you or those around you to effectively help guide you, and you get to kind of try it on. But the biggest issue is at the end of the day, it's not you. It's not authentic to you. So we know what's authentic based upon strength. When something is strong of character and the person is strong of words, that becomes appealable. It becomes comforting, like it draws people to you because people are drawn to strength. I think weakness repels. This is what's really fascinating with a lot of these kind of like really far left and even far right to some extent, to some example, these different like wacky narratives where you hear people say shit and you're like, that makes no sense. That hasn't made sense in 100 years and won't make sense 100 years from now. And when you hear people making just preposterous, nonsensical claims, it feels
ideology.
Weak. Yeah, it feels weak and disingenuous.
Weak people buy into ideology, and I don't want to get into religion on this.
Well, the reason being is it's easier to buy into ideology than support humanity. So it's one of two ways, right? You can either be, support humanity, or you can support ideology. And think about if you support ideology, it allows you to execute 30 million people. What do you mean? They didn't subscribe to my ideology. They got to go.
There's a sense of homecoming and belonging.
Yeah.
When you dive into an ideology like that. Let me ask you this, because here's my answer. But what is the most common word that somebody who's genuinely authentic? What's probably the number one word they use?
Generally authentic.
In my opinion.
What's the one word
they most commonly use?
I'm not sure.
No.
Oh.
No. Because they know people who are authentic. Into Jordan Peterson's talk, he did talk about your aim has to be so laser focused for what you're going for, whatever you're achieving, whoever you want to become, whatever. Authentic people know where they're headed, what it's going to take to get there, and they will say, no, this is just not for me.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you've gotten plenty of sponsorships thrown your way that I'm sure you've turned away. Like, oh, hey, promote this.
These dick pills.
These dick pills. Or we had Manscaped approach us, and I'm like, no. That's not who I am. It's not what we are. But
you mean manscaping?
Manscaping. There's a company called Manscaped.
Yeah. They sell ball shavers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amongst other things, John. Amongst other things.
What they sell? What, like face shavers too?
Face shavers. I think they got toenail clipping kits now. Oh. They've branched out.
They actually were going to sponsor us, and they sent me a care package, and they still use their little package for like grooming stuff.
Yeah, my wife has said something recently about my grooming. I really don't pay attention down there. I'm going to be honest. I don't.
Oh no, I meant like toenails and fingernails.
Toenails. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So when you do jiu-jitsu,
you got to
have clean toenails.
That is also what's the word I'm looking for?
So in jiu-jitsu, looking at somebody's hands and feet, and more importantly, how they clean their gi, like what's that, like cleanliness, or just attention to detail, how they like manage their package, their presentation, is very important in selecting a partner. So if somebody doesn't manage it well, I avoid them. Like, I'm going to
hurt somebody.
No, well, you're dirty.
Yeah. That too.
I don't
You're gonna get MRSA.
I don't want to be around stinky people with long toenails and get fucking sliced by your fucking cheese cutters.
I want to go back with ADCC coming up. 2 years working with Victor. Have you actually collected data on this, or is it all non-empirical?
No, I've collected data on these guys.
So you're going to show at the end of the two years strength, mobility, conditioning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's already drastically improved.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the fact that they had no strength conditioning program. So I mean, it's kind of unfair in that nobody has any exposure, and then you give them world-class exposure for 2 years in a consistent manner.
Are you controlling his diet as well?
I don't really here's the problem. Athletes under the age of 30, I don't really get too wrapped around the axle on diet. As long as he eats enough protein, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Yes. Where I start to get noticing with those guys.
Alcohol.
Well, they're not drinkers and they don't do drugs. So if they were big drinkers, then I would have to be a little bit more micromanaged.
What do you mean by drugs? Are we talking performance? I'm joking.
Well, if they took performance enhancing drugs, but they don't.
Because the ADCC does not test.
I know that's a huge problem.
Okay.
Those guys, well, I mean, they have made a commitment to not taking performance enhancing drugs. And the biggest reason I talked to them about it, I was like, well, here's the problem. You guys aren't even strong enough to have this conversation yet. So one day we will have this conversation, but you will be dramatically stronger because they're still relative beginners in terms of lifting weights.
Get the foundation right before
you. Well, yeah, but I mean, if you performance enhance, and we just had a guy on the podcast that talked about performance and testing for performance enhancers is dumb. But the way I look at it, if you go to the performance enhancing too early, like you take steroids too early in the cycle, you destroy all your genetic potential. You have to max out your genetic potential and max out your strength gains. That's going to take anywhere from it could be 2, it could be 4, it could fucking take 6 or 8 years. These guys are untrained amateurs. Their exposure to the barbell training was zilch. So we came in and we've made steroid-esque gains in terms of performance and strength. Like I couldn't hoped for gains the way they were making them if they were taking drugs, because it just doesn't happen. It only happens for beginners. And then at some point, probably once they reach, late 20s, early 30s, and they've kind of hit their genetic ceiling for strength, then we could have that conversation. But at this point, it's stupid. It'd be like, hey, I'm learning to drive strict. Great. Here's your Ferrari. Let them learn to drive. Let them learn to shift the gears. I mean, there's so much low-hanging fruit for these guys that I think going to the drugs too early is a mess up. It's a miss.
I think the problem here too is, hey, if you're using within your industry, that's fine. It's none of my business. But at least do a good job of hiding it. You look at the Conor McGregors of the world, and then even what was the ADCC champ?
Gordon Ryan.
Yeah, Gordon Ryan.
Well, he's good at what he does.
Oh yeah. No. I'm not disputing.
No.
Great fighters.
Yeah, no. I'm not saying he's not good at what he does. His forthright and his honesty, and kind of his thumbing a nose at it is, it's fucking disingenuous.
You should have just came clean. Yeah.
Well, no. He has come clean.
I know he has.
Yeah, but I get it. Every sport needs a bad guy. That's the age-old Muhammad Ali. I mean, it's Conor McGregor. I mean, everybody wants the villain, so I'll be the villain. To some extent, the problem is for a guy like Gordon Ryan, he's got a lot of health issues, so it's really minimized his exposure. I mean, he really hasn't fought since 2022.
Gordon Ryan.
Yeah.
Is he competing at this?
I think he's doing a super fight. He's going to do
one. So he maxed out comp for one fight.
Yeah,
that's smart.
Yeah.
Tyson, Paul. In Arlington too, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where they're holding it.
Yeah.
I'm sure tickets are already sold out.
You know what? I don't know. I haven't looked. What do you think?
I'm mixed on this. One, this is similar to what was it, Rocky V, where he came back
against
some innocuous actor.
Well, he was a boxer, where he fought Antonio Tarver.
Okay. Yes. And Tyson still looks good.
Yeah.
I would not want to be on the receiving end of a Tyson punch. Stamina is interesting. The Pauls have it.
Well,
but when you compare just experience, ring experience, and technique, Tyson wins hands down. But this is going to be interesting. Right now, I'm leaning towards Tyson will get him within the first 2 rounds. We'll see classic Tyson.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants a flash of greatness, and they want to see the brilliance that he had. And at the end of the day, I don't care if he's 18-year-old, 28-year-old, or 58-year-old Mike Tyson, still Mike Tyson. I think Jake Paul also subscribes to that little bit of like, I'm the villain in everything. And he's kind of I don't have a dislike for him, because for me to like dislike somebody, I actually have to put emotional effort into him. He just reminds me of the Mucinex. The Mucinex little like, the Mucinex guy who looks like the drawing. He's like, it just looks like the Mucinex. That's what Jake Paul looks like to me. He looks like the Mucinex guy. He looks like if Post Malone decided to lift some weights. He just looks like the Mucinex guy.
He's an athlete. He's an athlete.
He is. He has a professional coach. He brings in professional boxers. Mm-hmm. He trains every day. He does all of the things to become a professional boxer. He fought Tyson Fury's brother, and ended up losing that bout. But I mean, he's a legitimate professional boxer, so he's been in the ring with professional boxers. I just don't know if he's ready to get into. Tyson's 5'9", 220. I think he weighed in at right around 200 pounds for this fight. So I'm interested. The clips of Tyson fighting are, and him hitting the bags and doing that. It's shocking. I mean, it's frightening. And then Jake Paul puts out stuff where it's real like, very like one punch, right punch, which means that he's either hiding his material, or they're trying to bloat it up, or create whatever's going on.
I've got to assume Paul's reach has got to be pretty substantial to Tyson.
Yeah, but that's never been an issue for Tyson, because Tyson doesn't play.
Will get in. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he plays that inside game better than anybody. I mean, that was his dude, heavy hard to the body and short distance.
How many ribs that guy's broken?
Oh, how many souls he's destroyed? I mean,
he had multiple fighters crying in the ring. I think it was like 1 or 2 fighters that were crying.
No, he fucking ended dudes. I mean, there are few. I mean, like if you look at like the hierarchy of like boxing, I mean, you have like guys like Tyson, Roberto Duran. I mean, dudes that just went in and fought wars and were punishers. And it's an interesting play for Jake Paul. I really do. I mean, it's a play to get people in the seats. Is it this? Is it an exhibition? I mean, all these other things. But at the end of the day, I mean, he goes in there and gets fucking his head knocked off by Mike Tyson. He gets his head knocked off by Mike Tyson. If he goes in there and actually does okay, though, so what, he went toes with a 58-year-old man? Like I don't see.
Either way, he's walking home with a ton of money, and this is where the Pauls
those guys are fucking geniuses.
There are a lot of people out there that are authentic. They're authentically jackasses. And I think for a lot of people is, comparison is the thief of joy, is just stop paying attention to these people. Yeah. Do I see it in my feed? Yeah. Hey, but the Pauls are brilliant businessmen. Oh, brilliant.
Way better than us. Epic. Do
you know what that requires though? I mean, and these guys are, influencers.
Yeah.
Just macro influencers. The amount of content it takes to maintain that's exhausting. And I know that's not what you want. It's not what I want.
Yeah.
I'd rather have authentic, fewer segments that drive impact. But, dude, every kid wants to be an influencer now.
Well, it's because it looks like a lot of fun. You get, the coolest shoes, you get the coolest Pokemon cards. I mean, it's about stuff. I've really come to the conclusion that the Jack Kerouac era, the beatniks, if you own a rug, you own too much. The idea that, stuff ties you down, the Fight Club, it's, all of this stuff ends up tying you down and being the reason that you can't enjoy your life. What was the classic Tyler Durden? The stuff you own ends up owning you.
Yeah.
So now you're just working to maintain your stuff. One of the classic examples of that are storage lockers. People pay money to store their stuff and then forget about it. And then then they stop paying on it and they forget about it, and people go in there and like, look at all this stuff. Why would people pay to, that's like an interesting thing to me. Instead of just throwing it away, they're like, no, I'm going to need these yearbooks. I'm going to need this and this. I got a shipping container on my property full of like my wife's yearbooks and a bunch of random crap that if we ever move, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do with it.
I'm close to throwing my uniforms out. I'll keep, the things that matter to me are the pictures with the guys. Yeah. I'll keep my medals, but my kids will probably end up throwing them out. They're deep in a box anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, how many boxes is that? 100, 300?
It's one big chest.
Yeah,
that's it.
But if it's a Pelican case, you can get it to roll.
Yeah, seriously. This is going to be interesting. With I do remember the days because we're relatively the same age. How old are you now?
48. Just
48. I'm 47, and when'd you turn 48?
March 30th.
Well, congratulations, dude.
Thank you.
You got to let me know when your birthdays are. I don't tell you're like me.
Yeah. Can you tell?
It's another day. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some people like their birthday, which my wife's is tomorrow, and I need to go get something. It's like the biggest thing to them. And I tell people, like, you guys celebrated my birthday one time, and it really pissed me off because they had balloons and like sparkles on the ground.
Nice.
And then I had to clean up the sparkles. I'm like,
what the fuck?
I know. But my dad never really did pay-per-view, but for all the Tyson fights, he did pay-per-view.
Yeah,
I mean, that like boxing was.
Yeah. We watched
boxing was a different era back then. And I know MMA disrupted UFC and MMA disrupted it. But
whenever there was a big fight, all like my dad's buddies would all come over and they would he'd get the pay-per-view. And I remember them like sitting there having drinks, watching the fights. And we would watch. I mean, I remember watching Tommy Hearns versus Hagler. I mean, I watched Tyson fights. I mean, those were like cultural moments I remember. To this day, my brothers and I still talk about that.
Hagler, Robinson. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sugar Ray.
I mean, those were the heydays of boxing.
Well, it was awesome. Those guys got out there in like short shorts, and every one of them was fucking jacked and just stood in the middle and threw bombs. They looked like professional fighters. I think. Oh yeah. I mean, Vander Holyfield. I mean, the one brother, Logan Paul. Like Logan's in good shape. His brother's just kind of like, he looks like the Mucinex guy. Every time I see him, I think Mucinex. And he's going to get out there and fight Tyson, which is an interesting play. I mean, his brother fought Mayweather. Yeah. I mean, so what did they start on? Like, I forgot I mean, they were early YouTuber adopters, but they started on something else.
It was YouTube. I think they were both Michigan boys. I think they were both classically.
It was Vine. It was Vine.
Vine?
Yeah.
They were both wrestlers. Jack Kerouac was a wrestler, wasn't he?
Jack Kerouac wrote the book On the Road.
Yeah, I know. He was also, I think he wrestled at Oregon or Oregon State.
That I don't know, but where he lived was actually around the corner from where I lived in Berkeley. And there was like a beatnik house where like allegedly all those, kind of beatnik writers got to. So
because On the Road was about the I'm forgetting the phrase they used for the bus, right? They got the multicolor bus and no, was it the bus? Oh, dude, it's been years. Which was on the road was mandatory reading when we were in high school.
Yeah.
I don't know if it still is.
Well, I mean, so where he did all of his open mics, where they go do the spoken word, was at the City Lights bookstore, right on Lombard and Harrison. And the club that I used to work at was right there. So I'd always go early and go hang out and like see a little bit of the beatnik stuff. But that classic Jack Kerouac, if you own a rug, you own too much. And now we're in this situation where, like, I guess we always have defined people by what they own, but I don't know if there's ever been moments where these various kind of like items are now this like marker of celebrity, whether it be like watches, who has access to the newest Ferraris in this.
When you say we, again, I can't speak for the NFL, but I know coming from my community, I just didn't give a damn. Like, money wasn't an issue. And I still don't. I still don't judge people when they own. Again, I've said this before. I've met so many people that are rich in the bank and poor in character.
Yeah.
And the opposite holds true as well. You have a boat. Like, when I see a Ferrari, it's like, cool, man. That's awesome. Like, yeah, I would love to take that on Coda and just open it up. But, I'm happy with my Bronco.
Yeah, no,
I love
Bronco's badass.
I don't think I'll ever own. No, I'll own a sports car. Yeah. But this is where it's a conversation between my wife and I'm like, I'd get like a just souped up Charger, or like a Cobra Mustang. She's like
what year Charger?
I know that depends. That depends. But when I say Charger and Mustang, she's like, you're such trash.
What year Charger?
What? It could be a new Charger.
Like a new Charger or an old Charger?
It could be the jailbreak Charger.
Okay.
Yeah,
something like the demon jailbreaks?
If I'm gonna go hard because I want performance, I'm gonna take it on Coda. But every time I say that, she's like, "You're such trash." I'm like,
"Why? What's white trash about that?"
I don't know. It's some view she has. She's like, "Why don't we get a Mercedes or a Lexus?" I'm like, "No, like get something that's gonna perform." Yeah.
I would basically those cars are heavily stolen. They're probably the most stolen car in America.
Which ones?
All those Hellcats and all that stuff. Like the Hellcat.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and the better part about it is either that they either get stolen really quickly or they get wrecked like within like under 30,000. So
wrecked by the original owner.
Yeah. The owner will get in it. You can't handle them. And they just fucking wreck them. So you find those things. And you can actually buy the engines and the transmissions out of those fairly easily. And I've been trying to hunt one down locally, so I don't have to drive to Dallas for it. But if I can find one locally, I'm gonna put it in something.
When this comes down to driving, like if you haven't been through defensive driving courses, if you've not been through rally, driving courses, if you've not been through Bondurant, and you think you're just going to buy something with that much power, you're doomed to fail.
Well, it's all like 750, 800 rear wheel horsepower. So I don't know if that's at the crank or at the rear wheels, but I mean, it's all rear wheel drive. I mean, those people wreck the shit out of those things. I mean, this motor came out of a wrecked one with 8,000 miles. I mean, the amount, and there was actually, they just picked these guys up. There was a group down in San Antonio that was ripping off these cars, taking the motors and putting them in, like swapping them into things.
Interesting.
And there was a guy that had swapped one into a Dodge Magnum station wagon. And the guy, I hit the guy up on Facebook Marketplace because I was curious, hey, do you have more? And he's like, I got a whole bunch. So I was going back trying to like go down and meet with this dude. And then I just saw the other day that this like ring of car thieves that were stealing those cars, putting them in, swapping them in, got picked up. And I was like, man, I bet you that was the dude I was talking to. So.
Yeah, you definitely have to go higher in your security. You got to have a kill switch.
Yeah, well,
if you're going to buy something like that, I would assume they have kill switches in most Ferraris, right?
Yeah, but so with those cars, you can buy it. I think you can buy them on eBay. You buy a scanner, so you go over, you scan the code, and then you have a key machine that you can also buy relatively cheap, and then you scan the code and you reprogram the keys. It takes about 60 seconds, and then you just open the car, you get in, and you drive it away. So the security is pretty low. Probably the only way you're going to like get rid of these guys is if you had like an old school club. Like that's it. Like tied to that's it. Because they're just going to get in, key it, and drive it away. And all of a sudden there's a club on there. They'd be like, how do I defeat this?
Well, I mean, I was going to do that to my Bronco just so my wife couldn't drive it when I was on the road. But she drives that every time I leave. But she's got a kid on the way. We're going to do a mommy car, one of the new Land Cruisers with a 4-inch lift. I mean, the new Land Cruisers, they did a good job. Toyota's always had a problem with the screens, though. Not the function of them, but like her 4Runner has like a 6 or 8-inch screen.
Oh, it's a little tight.
Yeah, whereas Tesla, I think, created the screen war in cars once everyone saw how big that screen was.
Yeah, now it's like 14 inches, 16 inches.
I just had a Mustang. And I drove from New York to Annapolis, and I'll get in. I know Memorial Day, we just celebrated that. And the screen on that thing was actually one long screen, the dashboard, and it sort of flanges out towards the passenger seat. I thought it was well done. It was awesome.
Until something goes wrong and it just goes.
Well, the Bronco actually has problems with the functioning of the screen. Sometimes it just doesn't even come on. I've got to take it in, but did our 2 weeks of red carpet screeners for 777. It was Fox News helped us out just substantially, which they've always been good to us. Gavin Hayden, who's the SVP of Fox Nation, used to be the SVP of Fox and Friends, has been a friend and a mentor. And they hooked us up with a lot of national media. So we did screeners in New York, which we don't have a network, but it was still about 100 people at that one. Then we went to Tampa, home of SOCOM and CENTCOM, and that was packed, I think, over 350.
Nice.
Here to Austin, which was sold out in the one time I watched it with my wife. So every time we'd open up and we'd do a Q&A afterwards, when we opened up, we would just leave the theater because I can't watch the thing anymore. And then Dallas was a good turnout, and then LA, which had a good turnout as well. But the testimonials were far beyond what we had expected. I'm the type of guy, if you write a book or do a documentary, which this is my first, like I'm always like fearful to put it out to the world just because I just don't want to hear criticism. I'll hear criticism from people I respect or can do it with unemotional logic of
but you can't so Joe Rogan had a pretty good comment when he talked about social media. He called it pump and dump. He's like, you just put it out to the world and you just leave it the fuck alone.
And don't read the comments.
Like you never read the comments. Like just put it out to the world and just never go check it again. Like don't click on anything, don't read, don't engage, don't do anything. Like make it one, like it travels this way, it doesn't travel back. I mean, think about for him, he has to. I mean, everything he puts out, I mean, it's pretty interesting. So I wonder if that's a function of wanting feedback, or more importantly, just like being proud of something that you did and you want to see how other people are interpreting it. But then you have to remember, most of the world isn't educated enough to interpret it in a good way, and there are a lot of fucking assholes who like to throw rocks at shiny things. You know?
The keyboard cowards that hide behind some innocuous
I love
social media handle.
Yeah,
and so it went really well. The media is still going. I'm taking off to Nashville to go on the Mike Huckabee show on Thursday. But then I had the opportunity. Fox wanted me back out in New York. So after it was all done, I went out there last week. But I got to drive from New York to Annapolis. And Annapolis, is the home of the U.S. Naval Academy, to link up with some guys I served with, all senior to me, all mentors. It was good to see them. We are getting old. Long in
the tooth.
Long in the tooth, and just I always remember these guys, and I held them in such high regards. And we were laughing like, my right shoulder is completely done, or I got a knee replacement. But we watched 2 kids of the fallen SEALs, both awesome dudes. Their sons commissioned, one in the Navy to become a SEAL, one in the Marine Corps.
Oh wow!
And just see a lot of dudes. And I even saw, 3-star Admiral, who was the dude that hooked me up with my Austin tour and took really good care of me and saw me out of the Navy in a great way. So that was a great way to kick off Memorial Day weekend. And, I think back to your point, my whole thing is like, I'm enamored with the fallen. I just am, the guys I served with. And I believe heroism is for the dead. Yeah. And those that come back from war we survived something traumatic. And you should be prideful of that. But the intent of these documentaries is to tell the story of the fallen through the eyes of the living, while giving the living a reminder of who they are through challenge. Because a lot of guys come back and they just don't deal with that well. And I had an opportunity to sit down with another SEAL from the command, and then 2 guys from the unit yesterday. Dude, we ran into 2 unit guys at the Soho Lounge in Austin. Totally didn't know they were there, and just we put 2 and 2 together, and it became probably a 2-hour conversation about, and these guys are legendary. I recognize them both, and I knew one of their names, recognize the other guy by face. But one of them wrote a book, Where Have All the Heroes Gone? We're going to have him on. Mm-hmm. I'll let you know when. But this guy had a storied career, probably more combat deployments than I can count, probably like 15 during the heydays of Iraq. And he just talked about, not that he's not empathetic, he just doesn't understand why so many veterans are struggling. He's like, I was a commando, and this was my job, and I loved it. And you don't get to choose the time or place or who you get to fight, but it's who we are. And you should have no problems when you return to society. Yes, the fallen impact us, live in their memory. And he said some profound things that got me to think. I'm like, okay, I need to stop my little pity party, which I do compartmentalized behind closed doors, and my wife sees it because our wives know us better than anyone. And I'm like, okay, it's time to.
What's your pity party about?
I was grumpy all of yesterday, like fucking just pissed off on Memorial Day, and it's a bit of survivor's guilt. It's a bit of shame.
Well, was that I know our mutual friend made a comment once about all the guys that served with Michael Mansour, have that survivor's guilt.
Yeah,
and I was like, why? And I didn't serve, so I don't fucking know. So was it like because it wasn't me, or because he had the ultimate sacrifice, or did he one up us in some weird fucking?
It's actually a combination of all three.
Yeah, like he was put in. I would have done the same, but I wasn't given the chance. I always figured, people make heroic sacrifices because that's like the ultimate. I guess you could say like the ultimate display of like gratitude and thanks, and like, I'm going to do this so my friends get to go live on, and not living on in their memory, and like not taking that gift in a positive way. They always say that the worst gift, or like, what is it? The worst sin you can commit is not using the gifts that God gives you. So like that guy had a heroic sacrifice, and like, people are sad for it. And instead of being like, I'm gonna have a fucking drink once a year to this guy and say, hey dude, thank you.
I'm living.
Yeah.
I'm living. And no, I'm grateful. I think there's a little bit of shame in that. Yeah, there's survivor's guilt. There's shame in that I was the senior guy and there was mistakes made.
Yeah.
I will dissect those mistakes to a very granular level where another operator will come in and be like, bro, you couldn't have done anything about this or that or this, or you're dwelling over something that you couldn't control. Yeah. But still, it plays in my head. And then the extortion guys, I mean, what could I have done for extortion 17? Die alongside him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much it. But knew all those guys, knew him extremely well. And one of the sons was one of the guys on extortion 17. It's, and I preach a good game on media. Yeah, our job is to live in their memory, and I don't think I'm not living. I mean, we're doing some good stuff. We're driving impact.
Do you feel that you didn't do what you wanted to do?
With what? In the time in the military? Yeah. Especially post Mikey.
Yeah.
Post Mikey, it's almost like you go forward with a vengeance, and you're like, I'm going to give this gift to somebody else that I've been given.
Yeah.
And that opportunity. Saw a shit ton of combat after Mikey, a shit ton compared to most vets in the global war on terror. That was just by nature of the unit and the command, but and was decorated well for it. But it didn't give me the closure that I wanted. And I think on that day, Memorial Day, which is, I hate the word Memorial Day. It should be Remembrance Day, like the UK and Canada call it. But it's also, we say never forget. And never forget that these guys understood faith, family, relationships, communal sacrifice, character, integrity, and they were flawed. We have stories about these guys. We're all flawed.
But I mean, isn't that like I always think time knocks all the edges off everything?
Yeah.
I mean, and there's two types of people. I've met people, and I'm like this, like time knocks the edges off everything. Like, why was I fucking mad at that person? Seems stupid now. And then there's the other people where time just makes shit really sharp. And I've run into both types. And all of a sudden, like 20 years later, now you're like hearing the story and you're like, shit, dude, that's way more detailed than it happened. Like, what are you remembering? And so I think you run into two types of people. So there are those that sharpen with time and those that kind of knock the edges off. And, and I also think too, regardless of whether or not people, who knows? I mean, like whatever it was, you never want to like let that stuff diminish the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
And I choose to remember people in their best light. For me, it's just such a better way to live. Like I think that people walk around with so much hatred in their heart, and I like whether or not you get into some of that hippie vibration shit. I was thinking a little bit about the ayahuasca stuff.
I thought you were going to go there.
Well, I was because I didn't get to go, and so like talking to Shanji about it. There was something I read, and I don't know if this like approaches. They were talking about like the vibration of events, and that like certain people have different vibration. That's how when you meet people and they have like a similar vibration. I thought that was such like a hippie thing. And then as I was kind of reading more and more about the ayahuasca deal, they were talking about like changing of frequencies, and I'm like, fuck, could it really be that simple? That like maybe, who knows? I don't know, man. Like it's
the verdict is still out on that one.
I still because I asked Shanji about it, and Shanji still said he was feeling the effects 3 months later. It's altered the trajectory of his life. And it's made him a better person. It's done all this. He's really changed. He saw things for what he needed. And I think for him,
for him.
Yeah, it's changed. I don't have any historical, I didn't serve, I didn't do anything in terms of that. So like for Memorial Day, I just remember my friends, the guys that served and try to remember that they're, a lot of these guys had that ultimate sacrifice. I think back on, NFL guys that killed themselves.
Yes.
And I almost think like, how sad would it be to survive like this global war on terror, come home and die in like a car accident or like kill yourself or this, like that's one that really like makes me so sad. And I think about ex-NFL players committing suicide because they have something going on in their brain that they can't fix.
I think that's the commonality between the two is they have done autopsies on a few of the guys that have committed suicide and they had CTE.
Well, I would imagine, so there's two things. When I was very fortunate to go with the guys from Team 4 down to Mid-South, and I was telling you the story, we're walking by the kill house and they fucking detonated that wall and we're doing the breaching. That it was a quarter of a blast. It hit me on the side of the head. Like we were walking by like 10 feet and they yelled clear. And I think that they were fucking with people trying to blow it and trying to startle people. Dude, that impact, I felt that for a day. And like they were like, that was a quarter blast. So I'm wondering if like the blasting and then the other one is the boats. So did you read this research? They were showing the guys on the boats that every time they go over, it's like a 30, I forgot what the impact they called it, but like every time they go over the boat, every time it drops, it's like a mini concussion. So these guys that are in the boats have tremendous problems.
The SWICs, and I did that for 2 years.
Yeah.
The boats were there. You had some bad nights on the boat. And there was with those boats, which I think everyone has within the community now, something called the high-speed assault craft, HSAC. It could go nose down. And one of my first, I'd say 10 rides, we went into a nose dive. Just the way they timed the waves was wrong. We went nose into the wave and the boat went fully submerged under the water. But before, there's three guys that basically drive. There's a throttle man, a wheel man, and then you got the navigator. I was in the navigator position, which is where they stick the officer because you could do the least damage. And the throttle man and wheel guy were SWICs. They'd been on ribs pretty much their careers. And they had the wherewithal to identify that we were going to go under. So they went down below the little sort of screen. And I'm just keeping my head up. I swear to God, the back of my helmet touched the back of my neck. Wow. And we had to call all stop. I just like instant whiplash. I felt that for freaking days. But there were some, hips, head. Those guys, they get their bell rung more times than probably SEALs do. Yeah. But the breaching is just interesting because you're not taking it's not like you're taking a football level hit. Not at all.
The explosion and
then the waves.
Yeah, the waves are coming through.
The sound waves just rock you. Even worse was the Carl Gustav, which I know you've heard of. It's a big 40 millimeter weapon. You fire 3 of those in training. Not only do your balls hurt, your head hurts. And everyone's just like, hey, I just need to go sleep. Yeah. So usually we didn't do any training after the Carl G's, as we called them. You just let the guys have the night and wake up in the morning and then start training again.
Yeah, I mean, but that level of impact. And I always think, I think too often about those guys who go out and, let's say they go out and they have this storied career. And then that's the ending. The Junior Seau, has this historical deal, and this is how he chooses to end it. And that not being how it has to end.
Because they lose their tribe too.
Well, same thing for you guys.
Yeah.
You kind of, you wake up and you're in this deal, and then all of a sudden one day it's like, no, you don't get to do this anymore.
You don't talk to the people you talk to every day, and that's just the way it is.
I don't really talk to the guys I play with, and maybe that's good or bad.
But I bet if you saw one of them next week, it'd be like you saw them last month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like that, but that doesn't have to be the way it is. There's ways to treat this stuff, and I've gone extensively on many podcasts into it, from everything from like different treatments with hyperbarics, EWAT, all the things that we've done. Yeah. There's a way to fix this. Now, the problem is a lot of guys get into a pity party. There's no way to fix it. I'm broken. Now this is
that's victimhood.
Yeah.
That's victimhood.
But they almost, it's easier to be a victim than it is to be proactive and go fix this motherfucker.
And I think that's primarily why I'm grumpy on Memorial Day is the forever honor the sacrifice they made. And arguably right now, society is just a bunch of...
Isn't you not living life to the fullest, not honoring their memory?
Yeah, that's true. But it's just,
they didn't go out there and do it for these fucking assholes.
No, they didn't. And I'm not saying, every American is an asshole. I remember when I came back, I gave a speech on veteran transition and like hiring vets, and some guy who was just typical Texan basically said, he's like, so I disagree with a lot of what you said. And when you guys get back to the real world, you need to realize, and I'm like, let me stop you right there. I don't believe that America's the real world. What we saw over there was very freaking real, and that's the majority of the world. Like, we live in such a bubble here, a bubble of like, there is arrogance as an American, there's entitlement, there's, systemically across society, they put me before we. There's no communal sacrifice. That's what's disturbing. I think that also aids into the suicide problem, is that when vets who serve 20 years and all these combat deployments come back, they're like, "This is what I fought so hard for." I believe that that's God of.
And I'm curious on the guy that you brought up that you saw that said, "I don't know why people are having problems." I feel like there's certain people that are just designed for war. Like they're just looking for their time to fight. And it doesn't matter if it was here, the Battle of the Bulge, whatever. There's people that were, and I've heard guys from like World War II, and even some guys that since passed, but there were dudes like, ever listening to some of those old guys? Or like the one, like my one favorite was the guy. They interviewed the guy that was the flamethrower.
Yes,
and he was talking about how he could like kind of get it to be in these rolls, and he would like roll it in. And they asked him, they were like, "Well, how'd you feel about it?" He's like, "I felt nothing." He's like, "I'd like burning those dudes. I like watching them jump out." And he was like talking about it. And he's like, he goes, "I guarantee if you hand me one of those, I could still go burn Germans." Like just zero remorse, no like give a fucks. And it was just a different breed of individual.
That part, I have no problem. I want to be careful about what I say. I would smile and be giddy.
Yeah.
Giddy. I remember a woman in this, she didn't mean this in a good way, and she didn't like me and I didn't like her. She said, "What was the worst part about war?" And I looked her in the eyes and I said that it has to end and walked away.
Empty magazines.
if I could have done 5 or 10 more combat deployments, I would have stayed in and done 5 or 10 more combat deployments. The way I remember the heydays used to be.
Yeah, when you guys were running and gunning.
Where we didn't feel we had our hands tied behind our backs.
Was that once Obama came in?
You know what? I don't want to put it all on Obama, and Obama was very aggressive in certain ways.
Yeah.
He utilized certain forces quite a bit.
Sure.
Like quite a bit more than any previous president.
Yeah, but I'm just saying it felt like in the early part of the global war on terror, it was like the Wild West. And all the best stories, and I'm not one to sit around, but if somebody's going to tell a war story, I'm like, sweet, this is something I didn't do. But some of the like cowboy stories, this shit sound like the Wild West. I was like, man, that sounds like a good time.
And that's the term we use, like when it was the Wild West, or hey, it was the Wild West back then. And for anyone listening, like, oh, these savages. No, the guy still demonstrated kindness and respect and empathy to those that didn't need to be killed, to the non-combatants. They were great. They would do a raid. They'd kill the HVT, the high value target they were after. There'd be some kids in the building that were crying. You'd see them pick up a kid, crack a chem light, and give a moment of solace to that young kid. And
probably make a better life for that kid, because they don't have some pedophile rapist. Yeah, fuck those people.
Very, very true. But no. It was. I also use that day as fuel, like you just said, forever honor, live, and drive impact.
For Memorial Day, I always give thanks to that there's people that are willing to go in harm's way and fight for us. And, the issue you get into, this is where things get really sloppy. If you look at the U.S. government, and I am a fan of like all of the conspiracy, and they're not conspiracies, they're well established. I mean, you take a look like the CIA kills JFK, and we know that the CIA killed JFK. We know that Richard Nixon, and my dad knew Nixon, I think I might have told you that, told me he was probably the smartest man he'd ever met. Richard Nixon was by far the most popular president in American history. He starts asking, but you didn't know that. More people voted for him. and he starts asking a bunch of questions about the Kennedy assassination, and then the whole Watergate scandal that basically takes him down, where he's well in the lead. They don't have to go steal this information. Two people, unbeknownst to him, break in, steal that stuff, the Watergate deal, come back to him. They tell him, what does he do? They tell him, hey, you got to cover this up. He goes with that, and then all of a sudden, Bob Woodward, who was a Navy intelligence officer, gets basically the opportunity of a lifetime on his very first assignment, and has Deep Throat, who was the top FBI as his informant, to come in. I mean, Richard Nixon gets railroaded in this thing.
And resigns.
And resigns. Spiro Agnew, who was his VP, they got rid of him on tax evasion. And the first time in American history, we have a president that was unelected. So classic coup, they get rid of Nixon, they get rid of that guy, and they put the exact person they want. I mean, so in two presidents, we get kill Kennedy, put LBJ in, who's quite possibly the biggest piece of shit to ever walk the planet. And then we get, a Nixon. I mean, like, this is the government we live in. And yet this idea of democracy, go read Legacy Ashes, all that stuff on the CIA. I mean, it's really fascinating. But there is a power current. I mean, or my other favorite is we come off the gold standard. Why? Because there was no gold. There's a lot of shady shit.
They say that was one of the biggest mistakes ever made.
Well, the problem is we came off the gold standard, then we sold all that gold. So there is no gold in Fort Knox. That's the illusion. We live on a fiat currency. You know what they do? It's a wild deal. So this is the issue we run into. The individuals, the heroes that are asked to go into harm's way. The problem is the people pointing the fingers and putting them in harm's way. That's the disingenuous part.
We've got a serious issue here in my trust in government. I mean, Reagan again, Nixon, California boy.
Yeah,
Reagan, California boy. The 9 most dangerous words in the English language.
I'm here from the government. What is it?
I'm with the government. I'm here to help.
Yeah. And what's wild is Reagan said that. And look at like the Iran Contra deal. Venezuela oil with George Bush Sr. Comes down, and they send him down, and now all of a sudden they're basically making that as a honeypot and taking that and selling this, and now all of a sudden it's classic. This is what the CIA and the government has always done. It is.
Government is too big.
Yeah,
and
it's the largest sector. It's the largest employer of citizens in this country is the U.S. government.
And that is the problem.
Yeah, it is.
Private sector will always move more efficiently, effectively, and rapidly than big government can.
This country is run by unelected bureaucrats.
Mediocrity reigns in government. It's the least. We can't say we've got the smartest people in government, and it is so hard to fire a government employee.
Yeah,
it's like an act of God.
Well, so we have an issue, right? So think about this, right? Bush stands up and he declares war on terror. That's like saying we're going to find Santa Claus. Like there's no clear defined mission, right? That's just an open-ended checkbook.
Mission creep. Yeah. Mission creep after mission creep after mission creep.
Yeah, because it's like you're trying to the war on an idea. You're trying to change an ideology. You're trying to change. They should not let a president declare a war without a clear, defined objective and idea what success looks like.
You're saying what top generals who are now out were saying. There was never a defined scope or end objective, and quite frankly, what I think the administrations did poorly is, hey, this isn't going to be a 20-year war. This is going to be a 100-year war, and we're not leaving Afghanistan.
Well, the issue comes down to wars of occupation is about transfers of wealth. Look at who got wealthy during that. Halliburton and all the people that provided.
Military, industrial complex.
Yeah, the military-industrial complex. But that's a huge fucking problem. But think about every war we've been in. Well, except let's say World War I, World War II. Look at Korea. But look at Vietnam. If Kennedy doesn't get assassinated, we pull out of Vietnam, right? LBJ stays in there, and we stay in that fucking nightmare. For what?
There's a great documentary. Have you seen it? Fog of War. Mm-hmm. You've got to watch this. Please watch this. It's got to be one of my top 3 documentaries. It follows Robert McNamara, who's the Secretary of Defense under LBJ, advisor to JFK, and then stayed on for LBJ, and it's his thought process he had to be late 70s, early 80s about his reflections on the Vietnam War. It also follows his life because he served for General LeMay, who was a absolute war hawk. But it was interesting to hear his reflections. I mean, he at one point says, we got it all wrong in Vietnam. It wasn't about communism and the domino effect. It was they just wanted to unify their country, and literally the fear of communism spreading beyond Vietnam was just wrong. It was wrong, almost like Iraq. I can make a lot of arguments, and we lost a lot of friends there. Just didn't make sense.
Why did we go into Iraq?
Weapons of mass destruction.
Okay, but
which were never found.
Well, think about 9/11, right? Attacking on the trade towers.
Patriotism is at a high. Fever is at a high.
So how come we didn't go right into Afghanistan and go after Al Qaeda from day one?
We did 1 month later.
1 month later, we were
1 month later, we were in there. And where I think the complications come is that they could just squirt into Pakistan. And we hadn't set conditions with the Pakistani government that, hey, we're going into the FATA and you're coming from the east and we're gonna hammer and anvil these guys until we wipe them out. But Pakistan wouldn't do that because then there would be an uprising in Pakistan. And nor did the Gulf Cooperation Council, which is all the Gulf states, I think, do their part in the war on terror. And apparently there's now reports that Saudi knew a lot more about 9/11 than...
Well, weren't all of the guys who were in the 9/11 deal Saudis?
Predominantly Saudi.
So that's wild to me, the fact that, like, Al-Qaeda, they're all Saudis, and yet we go into Afghanistan. Feels like we're into the wrong country.
Orchestrated by UBL, who his location was in Afghanistan, where he had free reign. It's, yeah. And I try not to think about these things because it kills me. Ultimately, where I would go with this is, the power is we the people. We the people continue to elect these feckless leaders.
And we fund it.
So
how do we free ourselves of the tyranny of ineptitude and mediocrity
and elite, the political elite?
Well, I mean, the political elite. I mean, I think I told you when we were doing our military contracting, we had to hire a lobbyist and go to D.C. To try to get our program pushed through. And we went to go meet with all these people, and we'd go to the Trump Hotel, and everybody was sitting around having drinks. It didn't. There were no right side, left side. Everybody's sitting around, and the one thing they kept toasting was the stupidity of the American people, that they bought into this bullshit, that these people are at this person's throat and this, and sitting around buying drinks. And that's when I realized it was all a big scam. This is all a massive... You
were lobbying to get to enact a physical training program for...
Yeah, we were in the process of taking over the training for the 18th Airborne Corps. So, which is roughly 90,000 troops. We were going to implement power athlete systems for the 18th Airborne Corps.
This is what drives me crazy.
At the recommendation of General LeCamera. So, brought us in.
This is what drives me crazy. I do have one cool story, but if you look at our average soldier...
Oh, dude, don't even get me started.
There is something... So I wanted to be the part. I wanted to look the part. I wanted to do the part.
Be all you can be.
But you've got to be able to feel like you're going to crush the enemy. That you're at your physical peak.
So one of the problems that General LeCamera tackled and asked us to solve was the fact that there had been like a feeling of like mediocrity that they needed to beat out. That we needed to create a guerrilla army and change the culture of the U.S. Army, and that's what he didn't feel that he could do it from within. So he's bringing us in as outside contractors to try to bring a power athlete mentality to the section that he was in charge of, which was the 18th Airborne Corps, 90,000 troops.
I'm not patting myself on the back here, but the Talent Management Task Force for the U.S. Marine Corps at the Pentagon contacted me, not only because they were having problems with like 03s, 04s getting out of the military, and we had some very interesting conversations. But the guy's like, I need you to come talk to let's test bed this. I need you to come talk to Marines about leadership. And so he went to the assistant commandant of the Marine Corps and said, hey,
Why do they always think that some talk on leadership is going to do it?
Well, but they wanted to create a program from outside. Mm-hmm. And the assistant commandant, he gave me the true words where he's like, yeah, we've got a leadership problem. And every organization has a leadership problem. Even at your height, you have a leadership problem.
Sure.
He said, I don't dispute that the Marine Corps has a leadership problem. I just can't bring a SEAL or somebody from outside to assist us with leadership, and that's as far as it went.
So even though you are a Marine, the fact that you're a SEAL trumps that?
Yeah, it does in the eyes of them.
Didn't that seem weird?
Funny enough,
that you've somehow, stripped yourself of all that makes you a U.S. Marine.
And I talk about the Marine Corps when I speak to companies.
Yeah.
They laid the foundation. I'd love I don't know, I guess MARSOC now and Marine Scout snipers and all that. But, at the time which you served before all that stood up, I mean, to be at the tip of the spear was to probably go into Naval Special Warfare as a Marine. I mean, I know all the MARSOC stuff has stood up equally since. It stood up, I think, a year after I finally had completed BUDS, and I'm like, the snipers, I'd become a sniper, and they actually recently disbanded the snipers.
Yeah.
And this is like history. They've done this multiple times. Post World War II, disbanded snipers.
Why? Because they had some insignia that they felt wasn't it something weird like that?
The Marine Corps has always had a distaste for people who, every Marine's a Marine, every Marine's a rifleman. Yeah. That's not true. Not every Marine is equal. Just bottom line. And when you organizationally, I understand the organizational mindset, we are elite. But if you go on to any NFL team and you take all the linemen, you can rank them. Yeah. If you have 10 linemen on the roster from number 1 to number 10. Yeah. And it's the same thing with Marines, but they didn't like the notion of an elite Marine, and that's actually why they didn't join SOCOM. It was Commandant Al Gray when post Desert Eagle, the failed hostage rescue attempt for the hostages in Tehran, where SOCOM, out of the after action in the investigations, SOCOM was formed. Marine Corps was offered a seat in SOCOM with all the rest of the services, and General Al Gray said, no, every Marine's elite. And it was the biggest mistake. And even those in Force Recon and Recon knew it. They're like, we should be in SOCOM. So I'm glad to see that MARSOC is formed. But I was staying at a hotel in the Times Square when I work with Fox, because their studio is very close. It's on the Avenue of Americas. So I'm walking past, the shit show that is Times Square. Yeah. And this is last week. So they're getting ready for Fleet Week. And I see all these Marines. And I forget, it's the statue of the chaplain in front of one of the big screens. It's sort of an open area. And so I walked over there and was just watching, and some Marine was like, hey, did you serve? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And, we got into conversation, and they were doing a presentation. They had the 8th and I, which is they're all 6'1" or taller. The guys are just awesome at drill, the band, everything. The Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps was there. And so they're like, hey, all former Marines, get in formation over here. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. And the Marine next to me is like, go fucking do it. So I get in formation with all these old Marines, none of who are in shape. Yeah. But prideful. And everyone's saying, Semper Fi, where did you serve? And so we had to stand in formation doing the old, dress right dress. And the commandant, the Sergeant Major was leading the formation. He's like, you probably forgotten this. Dress right is left arm up, right arm straight, file down, rank and file. And so putting us at attention, parade rest, attention. So I'm in my suit with all these guys. And then they rallied all the Marines after they gave an award to some kid who'd saved somebody's life in the Hudson. It was, I was smiling to be in formation again. Couldn't get my right arm into position for parade rest. So I had to almost keep it on my hip, but it felt good to feel that one last time. And then I walked to my hotel just smiling. It was, they still have the fire. They still have the,
well, the one thing I do like about the Marines is even when you meet old Marines, they still identify as Marines.
Former Marines. There's no ex-Marines.
Yeah. And they usually identify themselves. They're like, I served, and they still identify themselves as Marines. And for the most part, obviously not everybody, but for the most part, I've met a lot of old Marines that were still pretty fit.
Yes.
They still keep in shape, and different than any other branch of the service I've met.
Your fitness just says everything about you. How you just said it. You were talking about somebody about how they present. Oh, geese.
Yeah.
I had a great Marine officer said an ounce of appearance is worth a pound of performance. Mm. You will be judged the second you walk through that door, not only for your uniform, but more importantly, do you have a double chin? Does your uniform have the rolls on the side? Yeah. Because you've got love handles. And so they do put a precedence on fitness, but even the younger Marines, man. But this was my time in the Marines. there's some guys that just don't adhere to that physical portion of being a warrior.
Well, that's the one thing I do appreciate about Sornex. They have always preached. I mean, they're an equipment company at their core, but this physical culture, the idea of like, look the part, physical culture and training, and like that event we went to. I mean, it's really just a homage to that. But I mean,
I've got to assume all 700 are pretty damn.
Well, not everybody. There were some fucking fat people where I was like, damn, that dude fucking out of shape. But there's also this idea of like, it's okay to be big if you're strong. Like if you're not,
if you're a power lifter,
or you're a strong man, or so you see some dudes that are, probably really strong but out of shape. I think those days are behind us. In the NFL, like, there was, they're linemen, they need to, they're fat guys, but for the most part, that's not the case. Just do a little bit of aerobic work. Don't eat like an asshole.
We'll get Dr. Parsley, Kirk, you and I want to dive into the obesity epidemic and how it is just, I'm tired of hearing about mental health. I really am. Yes, I talked about guilt and shame, and that is the mental component. But guess what? I deal with it and I move forward.
I had a really intense conversation with a doctor the other day on the phone. Just kind of give you a little bit of backstory. We got some gut testing done by a doctor friend of mine. It's like, hey, this lady's doing a research study. I want you to be in it. So we applied, and she sent us the kits, and we got some testing done. And then my wife got on a call with this lady, kind of the consult, and she was trying to replay this to me, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, none of this is making sense. So I reached out to the doctor and introduced us, and I was like, hey, she did a consult with my wife, and I need to talk to this lady. So then the doc called her and was like, hey, these are friends of ours. Like, this is who John is. So then she called me on the phone, and we had about a 90-minute, maybe 2-hour conversation. This fucking lady is a badass. She is the doctor. So her lab is the one that found COVID in the stool and went through and was able to go through and show how the vaccine, and more importantly, the spike vaccine, was destroying the integrity, and more importantly, like the gut diversity and how it was affecting us. So we got into this deep dive. So she has synthesized the genome in the gut. And like, do you remember ever reading any of the Weston Price stuff?
No.
Do you know who that is? So Weston Price was a dentist in the early 1900s. His son died of like a tooth abscess, tooth decay. And he became obsessed with this idea of like, why is this happening? We should have evolutionary, we should be past this. So he went and visited all the original hunter-gatherer tribes, and he took all pictures of their face, analyzed their teeth, and he figured out that like, one, they didn't have any tooth decay. And he was the one that like looked at all their faces. Their faces were wide, the noses, they didn't have diabetes. Like, none of the modern mortalities that we deal with were even prevalent. They either a wild animal ate these people, they died some tragic way, or they were really old and they just went to sleep and like didn't wake up. So the Weston Price's entire foundation has been like, this is a diet issue, that if you eat like our ancestors did, like, you can return. It's really the basis of the paleo stuff. So as I was getting into it with her, and she's like, they are partially correct. It's not the fact that they're eating those foods. Those people are so robust because of their guts, and the gut bacteria that is in their gut is so diverse and so dynamic and dense. So the foods that they're eating, you just can't eat their foods and hope that your gut, because one, the modern life has basically destroyed it, everything from antibiotics to the foods we eat and this, and she went through this whole thing. And so she has, this is pretty wild because Cash got tested. She went through and was like, okay, here's his gut. Here is the bacteria that digests carbohydrate. He makes zero. He has no digestion, or he has no bacteria in his gut to digest or digest sugar. Of course, he's going to be diabetic. So she was able to find the exact thing that he's missing. And so now we have a full genome of his gut, and more importantly, why it's not like in comparison to like 18th-month-old to an 18-year-old. She can show like all of, and to the point where she's been doing research on autism. And she can look at like autistic kids' guts and say, and this was wild. So you've seen the when they talk about kids on the spectrum.
Yes.
What puts somebody on what spectrum? What makes them a little bit versus a lot? It's how much gut bacteria they're missing. You miss one piece, you might be here.
So is there a way to
Yeah.
Not overturn, but affect that through supplementation and diet?
Yeah, fecal transplants and a bunch of other things. So she has what she did, she had a severely autistic child, kid 19, like to the point where they had to strap him, sedate him because he just beat his head into the wall. They looked at the sister, figured out what he was doing, and they were able to do fecal transplant from the donor and do it like actually up in like you do a colonoscopy and implant it. You know, a year later he has words.
No kidding.
So her entire thing is, if you want, and this goes back to the Adil Khan Eterna thing I went to, like we're going to live to 120 years. We physically can figure out how to get us to 120. But he talked about, we have to figure out how to avoid all these common mortalities, to not die of cancer, to not die of this and this. And he went through the whole thing. The reason that all of these are affecting us is because the lack of diversity and the dynamic nature in the gut. That if you can create an extremely diverse and dynamic gut, the normal modern mortalities don't affect you. And so pretty fascinating when you look and you're like, okay, the Weston Price stuff with what he was really talking about, the diet, but like think about the way that they were eating. I mean, it's just like, and she got into like leaky gut, went through how it all works, but really it comes down to if we can get tested. And so my next thing is, because I got Kate and Cash tested, so now she wants me to get the girls and me, and so I signed away for kids. But my next meeting with her is like, show me what my perfect gut looks like, and how do I get to it? If I'm going to live
food supplementation,
however,
is there anything they can do for Cash?
Yeah,
that
so
doesn't alleviate diabetes, but
so this is a two-part deal. Adil Khan and I had a really long conversation, through the biologics that they have with stem cells and exosomes and all the cool stuff that he has. He can repopulate the pancreas. They can fix the alpha cells and the beta cells. The problem is, if they don't fix the gut trigger, it doesn't matter. It'll just happen again. So meeting this doc, and I put them into touch. Now figuring out, like, this doc knows what the gut trigger is and can go in, and we have to figure out how to fix his gut. And then once we fix his gut, then we can go back and do the first part and repopulate the pancreas. So, I mean,
God bless smart people.
So as I was telling her, I was like, Cash is, he's such a good kid. He is, you get to hang out with him.
He's a mini you.
Yeah, he's the best. He's the best piece of me that I would ever hope for. He is, and he's so positive and so like, just part of the deal, Dad. Like, I would have fucking raged. I still rage over this thing that he has to get tackled with this. Like, after like jujitsu, he'll come out and be like, I feel low. And like, we'll hang out. I'll be like, hey, dude, just hang out. Or like, he's playing baseball. He's like running the bases, and he's just like, I can see him out there, and he's just sucking up to get through it, because it's such like a, like when you feel tired, feel sick to your stomach, like that, like a low blood sugar hits you, and he just battles through it. He's so fucking tough. But I told her, I was like, it sucks because he's such a good kid. And she goes, maybe this is the kid who is the face when we fix this fucking disease. And I was like, I'm in. So what do we got to do? So now we've been, I've been talking with her a bunch, and this lady's a badass. I didn't realize how badass she was. So I want to talk to her some more, but I'd love to try to either get her here or get her on a we do a joint with her and podcast, because the information. Now the problem is people like her, like she's an MD, PhD. I mean, she's a legit person.
She's going to go to the mitochondrial level like Kirk.
No, but I think what happens is people in minivans, they don't want people like her to be able to do this research. I just think that because it goes against too many of these narratives, and like, it's pretty fascinating when we got into it, and she said the exact thing I've always said. The person that can eat the most diverse diet without problems is the healthiest person. If you're and Sean Baker was actually out. He spoke at Summer Strong. Okay. So I got to sit across from him, at dinner, which is hilarious, because as he orders, everybody's like looking at him, like, did he get the steak? And I told him, like, you're fucked. You can only order a steak. I know.
He's got the mac and lobster, or the lobster and mac and cheese.
And then the hilarious part is we're getting into it. He's like, I do have a piece of cake on occasion. I'm like, don't tell anybody. They might kill you. You're the face. You're the carnivore guy. I mean, but it's one of those deals where if the only thing that you can digest is red meat, think how broken your gut is. And so as I sat down with her, and she's like, is there a perfect human diet for every individual? And she said, there is. Like, I can sit down And we can look at your diet, we can look at your gut, see what you're missing and add things. And over the course of time, we can probably figure out what works for you as an individual. Yeah. The problem is that people are like, boop, this is right for everybody. Carnivore.
Miami. Grapefruit.
Yeah. Like diet. But what they're trying to do is like, and even the paleo stuff to some extent, like 99% of the world does better on a non-processed food diet, which is really with a paleo diet.
Go figure.
Yeah. So eat a non-processed food diet.
And I do want to stop you. Cash is an amazing kid. Your daughters are freaking hilarious.
Yeah. Well, you met Jamie. Did you meet Kelly, my blonde daughter? Or just
they were Jamie? Both at Kirk's wedding.
Okay. Yes.
But in two very different personalities. Yes. One you could tell is less emotional, maybe reserved, and the other is just outspoken. Is not going to very direct. Yeah. Not going to hold her tongue.
A lot of shit talking.
Yeah. Hilarious, dude. How tall are they right now?
Jamie is creeping up on 5'8".
You think they're going to be tall?
I don't know. Jamie was like 5'7". She's 5'7"-ish, and so she's 12. So I think if she can I keep telling her, if she can get to like 5'8" or 5'10". But then the problem is she's a little bummed because all the boys are so short. And she's like, Dad, I'm like, it's not going to be like that forever, Jay. Like as soon as they hit 14 or 15, they're all going to blow past you. 5'8's not a tall man.
Or you're going to have to wait until college. But what is she playing? They're playing basketball.
Yeah, so she plays basketball.
I thought they were playing field hockey or lacrosse.
No, she plays basketball 4 nights a week. So that was, and then Cassie was in baseball, and then Kelly rides. So I'd like to try to get
rides
her
bikes,
horses. Yeah, so I want to try to get her into some other stuff too.
Yeah,
but that baseball schedule and between basketball and baseball was killing my nights for the last like 3 months. So I was like trying to go to jiu-jitsu at lunch, and I wasn't getting to train nearly as much.
I'm putting off how this is going to change my life until the baby's here.
So here's the problem, right? The baby's not going to change your life, right? Like now you just got 3, like 2 extra, like one more. Like I realized that it's like when the kids are at home and they're kind of going through all this, it's when they hit like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And now all of a sudden you're like a carpool where you're just taking them to these sports. Before we used to be able to take them gymnastics and we'd sit there. Now it's like basketball game. Like Jamie's playing these basketball tournaments and they play like 4 or 5 games over the weekend. It's like, oh, she's a basketball game in a tournament in Round Rock. I'm like, oh shit, it's like an hour away. It's like just far enough where you can do the drive, but not too far where you have to get a hotel.
You see, my career, like I've got to be on the road. It's by the nature of the speaking industry. Like I've got to be gone or doing TV hits.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, because when I get home, I'm wore out. Because when you're staying in a hotel, it's, I don't want to cop out. You can control your diet, but I usually try to eat like fish, meat, stay away from as much processed foods. And so it's usually sashimi or steaks.
Sure.
And like by the time I get back, I'm not having carb loaded.
Think about the disease filtering of the airplane. Every time I get on, like, I don't want to be a germaphobe, but every time I get on the plane, I'm like, oh God, I'm stuck in a tube with just recycled air for the next 4 hours with a bunch of people.
With these savages.
Well, I do you remember that crazy ass preacher that's like that, like televangelist guy where they were like, hey, why do you need an airplane? He's like, because there's demons on the plane. Remember that? You know what I'm talking about? Oh, like if you look it up, there's this lady who's interviewing. I'm like, hey, why do you have an airplane? He's like, because I'm not flying with demons. And he's batshit crazy. But I'm always in there, and I'm like, oh, man, none of these people are healthy, and they're all coughing. So I try not to touch as much. But, man, I wonder if I'm getting turned into a germaphobe. And then I wonder if, like, maybe just my gut isn't as diverse as I need. But the hilarious part was she asked me, the doc was like, hey, have you had COVID? And I said, I haven't, but I'm secretly hoping I'm going to get it one of these days. And so when I got sick, I was like, this is it, Parsley. And then he got me the ivermectin. He's like, how are you feeling? I'm like, I feel nothing from the ivermectin.
It wasn't COVID.
Oh, well, it wasn't COVID, but I will tell you there is a side effect to ivermectin. You know what it is? You feel more American. If you want to feel American, you take ivermectin.
So I'm just going to take it as a morning supplement.
You know what you do? If you get up every morning and you take ivermectin, you're like, God, I've never felt so American in my life. This is what America is. It's ivermectin pills. I don't know why, but I felt really more American. And then I texted that to Parsley, and he like texted back. I just laughed out loud. And I was like, because you know it. That's what it means.
I was on a flight that got diverted because Dallas is a nightmare.
The worst. Every time I go through there, it's
weather. It's so
cancel.
We had to land somewhere else, and people were losing their goddamn minds, and they were yelling at the sweet flight attendant, and I almost lost my shit on the people. It's like, hey, there's nothing she can do. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
she's
not flying the plane.
Just sit there and knock out work. And it was all the Western country boys from Texas they had their draw. It's just like, people.
Wait, so the hillbillies were screaming at her?
Oh yeah, the rich white hillbillies were just like, I've got to be somewhere, and like everyone's got to be somewhere. Yeah. Nobody wants to sit on this tarmac waiting to refuel and waiting for the clearance from Dallas. So just calm the fuck down and knock out some work, or read a book, or Wi-Fi was still working, so get on Wi-Fi. Dude, people, there is a mental health problem in this, and there's a total lack of mental toughness.
So, there's certain cultural phenomenons that I'm really kind of amazed about. One of which is Breaking Bad. Did you watch Breaking Bad?
I never got into it. Okay. I know the whole premise.
Okay.
Never watched it though.
Did you ever watch an episode of Breaking Bad?
Yes.
Okay. I had never watched Breaking Bad. And then I was on the airplane when I was going out there. I was like, you know what? I've never watched Breaking Bad. Let me download them and I'll watch them on the plane. Holy shit. Why people would want to watch Breaking Bad, I am still fucking fascinated by. It is the single most depressing thing I've ever watched. Like, the poor dude gets cancer and then starts cooking meth to try to make money for his family. And then the calamity of things that happen, from getting kidnapped by the drug dealer, and the wife who's just obsessively henpecking him. He's got his fat brother-in-law who's the DEA agent. I mean, there's so much fucking calamity and anxiety watching this show. I was on the plane and I'm just like, I need to watch Happier. I need to watch something like a documentary, educational. I got off and I was like, oh, and people are like, I love that show. I'm like, why? Why that was a cultural phenomenon and people were so excited about Breaking Bad? People are dying. He the one dipshit puts a guy in the bath upstairs and then pours bleach in it, or acid, and then the sludge melts through and it's just dripping. I'm like, he fucking strangles a guy in the basement. I'm watching this and I'm just like, this is the worst, gnarliest show I've ever seen. And the fact that people were this into this is just beyond me.
There's probably a historical case to be made about how dark drama has become compared to, let's say, the 50s, 60s, Dude. 70s. I mean,
Will, did you watch Breaking Bad? I did. Am I right?
It's rough.
It's beyond rough. It's the fucking gnarliest thing, and they're cooking meth.
What was the darkest thing in the 60s or 70s? Cool Hand Luke?
Yeah.
Everything was more upbeat and cheery.
I don't know if, I was thinking about movies. I was thinking of remember the movie Swamp Thing?
Yes.
You remember that, where he gets stuck and he turns into the Swamp Thing, and then he's killing these people. There's always been these gnarly movies.
But that was considered horror back then.
I'm pretty sure Breaking Bad is a horror movie. If that's a cultural snapshot of what's happening in New Mexico in 2013, fuck, we better hope that just an asteroid hits the earth and fucking ends it. I'm watching this and I'm like, Breaking Bad, everybody talked about it. I'm like, Walter White, and I'm watching it and I was having not anxiety, but I was on the plane and I don't need to be watching this on an airplane. I'm looking around. I'm like, this is the craziest show I've seen. And people were it won awards. It was this yes. cultural phenomenon. And I was like, so whenever people get too excited about something, I'm like, but then it'll come back later to it. No fucking way.
There are very few TV shows that I can get through that have multiple seasons. Yeah, there was the Game of Thrones and things like that. But I rarely make it through. If you heard the term jumps the shark?
Yeah.
Most of it jumps the shark after.
Do you know where the jump the shark comes from?
No, I don't. You're from LA.
The jump the shark came from Happy Days. So Happy Days was at their final season when everything was going down, and they had this
finale
where the Fonz was on this jet ski. And he went over and jumped over this shark and landed, and that was the end of Happy Days. And so when something jumps the shark, it's fucking done.
It's done. Well, that's a personal thing. I did watch. Have you watched Civil War yet?
The movie, yeah.
You saw it?
Yeah.
Did you watch Civil War?
Is it a movie?
Yes.
No.
The premise is, and they really don't get into the background of why America's at war. So basically, you've got the Florida separation forces. You have the two-state America.
Who's starring in that?
I couldn't tell you one of the actors' names except for the gal who's the main character, Kristen Dunst.
Is it in the movie theaters?
It's in the movie theaters. It's now on Apple or anything else. But basically, Texas and California combined forces. But I think the premise is, from what I gathered, is it's a Trump-like figure who declares a third.
Dude, I have not
term.
seen it, but I do know what you're talking about now, where it's kind of like the modern day Civil War.
Yes, and there's a lot of violence, and I think it just plays to how stupid Americans could become.
Could, or we already?
Yeah, how far it could go if there'd be that tipping point moment, but it very much was a hit at Trump in that he would declare a third term if he was president.
I don't want to have our country led by senile 80-year-old men. My mom's 84. I love her to death. I don't need her leading the country. Biden, and then Trump, can't they just send them to a retirement home and then we get some new pieces of shit to come in and lobby for this job?
There's nothing I will dispute you on what you just said. Nothing. If these are our two options,
it's
which way.
America.
If you know which way I'm voting. But I do third parties, to vote libertarian. As much as I do agree with some libertarian views,
did you see Trump and he's like, "Hey, you guys should nominate me for your libertarian," and they were booing him, and he's like, 3%. Maybe he could actually get some fucking votes. I think this is the thing. I do appreciate about Trump. I feel like he's just trolling everybody. He is to politics as the Paul brothers are to boxing.
That is a good analogy.
He's the Mucinex guy of politics, whereas the Paul brothers are like the Mucinex of fucking boxing.
With Biden, it's performance. It is performance for me. And I don't want, as a small business owner, this has been a rough 4 years. This has been a really rough 4 years. And that alone, which way my vote goes. But I will give you this. At the end of the day, Trump is a business leader, and he's not wrong about certain things in government. He is a brick through the establishment window, and the establishment is extremely powerful, and that's where the power lies. It shouldn't lie there, but he will stand up the Keystone Pipeline. He will drill. He's going to get rid of payroll tax. He's going to make it a business conducive environment. Do you
honestly believe that the powers that be will allow Trump to be elected?
No. And here's the thing.
It's not going to fucking happen.
If Biden wins,
weekend
you
at
have an
Bernie's,
uproar.
another 4 years.
You've got an uproar. If Trump wins,
but nothing
you have an
will
uproar.
happen.
Oh, because most Republicans go back to work on Monday.
Yeah. Now, if Trump gets in, they're going to set this motherfucker ablaze.
Oh.
We're going to have,
riots.
George Floyd 2.0. I mean, that whole deal's coming out. We're going to have, they're going to set this motherfucker ablaze. They will try to burn this country to the ground.
On that note, this was interesting. Tamara, who's our business partner, spent 2+ decades in PR. Did you see that text she sent about CNN? Yeah. CNN had little to no hits on Memorial Day.
Are you surprised by that?
That's the one thing. Back to Memorial Day. Put your politics aside when it comes to our troops and the 1.3 million Americans that have given their lives to secure freedom. That's something both parties can get behind.
Yeah,
that is it is they tell us we have to be apolitical when we join the military, which is sort of hypocritical.
Yeah,
because we're political beings. That was astonishing. So shame on I've got to assume MSNBC and all the rest fall into that bucket. Shame on them, dude. Shame on them.
They've taken so here's the hard part. With as much conspiracy and as much as people are feeling that they are them against the government, I mean, it's really this prevailing thing. And if you think that the government is at the behest of every conspiracy and, down to, did you hear the one with in Hawaii where they were using the high energy weapons that only doesn't burn down people with blue roofs? And then they were going through and like, surprisingly, they were like, that sounds batshit crazy. And then they were showing these aerials and every house that had a blue roof was fine. And it was like Oprah's house and these I'm like, holy shit. Like, I don't know if these are conspiracies or these are accurate, but like, I mean, like blue roofs, this seems crazy to me. And so you have all of these things that are kind of permeating around. And the worst part about it is people are looking at it like these soldiers are an extension of that. So is in terms, and I always say like right or wrong, like I don't care who these individuals are, but they still send our people in harm's way. Like you support our troops. And they're not decision makers. These are the people that get sent to war. And I was very fortunate at Sorinex a couple of years ago to hear what's his I'm gonna tell you it's Kyle
jumped on a grenade.
Yeah.
His name will come to me.
Yeah.
And good man.
Dude. Probably one of the best humans.
Sweetest.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, and then also God, it's I shook his hand as Kyle. I'm trying to remember his last name, but he gave up and he gave the moment in which he dove on the grenade and felt the explosion. He only talked about thereafter, how he went through all the surgeries and this, and he was like, had no hands and no fingers. And he was downstairs, like telling the story about just trying to eat cereal. And his mom came down and he was crying and he's like, Mom, like who's going to love me? And I realized the reason he was downstairs at his mom's house, because the kid was 18 years old. And like looking at like the nicest, best of us in this kid, and like listening to probably one of the greatest speaking thing. Like I've never heard somebody speak that well and speak with that much passion. And it like completely changed the way I thought about public presenting. But then having this moment of realization that this is who we send to war. We send these kids, and if this is who we send, we have a responsibility as Americans to one, fix your broken toys, and two, you support and you honor these kids that make this sacrifice. Now, they're not up there thinking about tinfoil hat and blue roofs and global conspiracies. They're thinking about, I'm going to protect my friends and family, and this is what I've been called to do. And they're out there for the purest of reasons. And the fact that people don't support those kids, and I'm like, right or wrong, I don't give a shit who's the president. I don't care who these non-elected bureaucrats are. Those kids and those people, and that's why I was so passionate to work with 18th Airborne, and we went in because I got a chance to go in and teach 18 seminars, and we worked with hundreds of these kids, and I met them, and that was the kid that we met. These kids that were showing up, that were joining the Army for a betterment of their life and to serve their country and everything that they believed in. And these guys were willing to go in harm's way, and I felt that if they were going to go in harm's way, then they deserved the best opportunity and to be provided the best strength conditioning information so that they had the best chance to get home. And the U.S. Army didn't agree with me.
Nope. That's big Army. That's big Marine Corps. And that's an issue as well. I recently went on a segment with, it was called The Status of Our Military with Pete Hegseth. Tim Kennedy was on there. David Bellavia, who's the only living Medal of Honor recipient from Iraq. A guy named Scott Mann, who's a good man, and myself. And at the end, because I belong to this group, we call ourselves the Centers of Gravity. And I said we need a military cultural exclusion act to protect our militaries from these social experiments being forced down their throats that are just not conducive to the culture that the military needs to maintain lethality and combat readiness, which are the two things you're ultimately judged on. Are you ready at a moment's notice, and how lethal are you on the battlefield? That's what you're judged on. And to be lethal, that requires intelligence and innovation and kindness and respect and empathy. And we do put a precedence on education, but even some of our top generals, I hate to say it, are just feckless. And there's a great book by Thomas Ricks called The Generals, about the decline of leadership standards and accountability amongst the general ranks since World War II. And we are going to try to do something about it. And I've been advised to not touch it, just and it's not about administrations. I don't care what administrations in power. When it comes to our military, we are constitutionalists. We swear an oath to the Constitution. We obey the commander-in-chief. But with certain things like the DE&I, which is inherent in leadership in itself. I mean, the military is a cross-section of the diversity of this nation in terms of race, equity. Everyone is there for the same purpose. They have equity in the purpose of defending our nation and defending our freedoms. And then inclusion, if you meet the standard, if you're a decent human being, nobody cares what you look like, who you love, whether you're a man or a woman, you're included. So it's just not a fit, and especially the amount of money, like renaming these bases and trying to erase history, which Jordan Peterson talked about a little bit during his speech.
Well, those who forget our history are doomed to repeat it.
Exactly.
It's one of the craziest things.
We've got to protect our military is the bottom line. There are great leaders who are going to do the right things. We don't always get it right, but comparative to our national leaders in the political side, we have a much better track record. Yeah. Not like we're playing in two different leagues, like the NFL All-Star team versus a bunch of state championship high school football players. I can get behind, and that I can fight for.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that will end it there. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Power Athlete Radio. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by kofi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.